Hello, I'm Alexa. You're listening to Adaptive by Design, and today we have a very special guest on the show. I have with me Filippo, who is a senior product design manager at Zendesk, and most importantly, he happens to be my manager at Zendesk. Now, Filippo didn't hire me on the team since I've been at Zendesk longer than he has, but he has been a UX and product design manager for over 5 years now and has lots of experience with managing and growing design teams. Filippo, I'm so glad you're here. I'd love to start by having you share a bit about why you decided to switch into people management from what we like to say, doing the day-to-day design work.
Yeah. Well, thanks, Alexa. I'm glad to be here with you today. Let's talk about it. So, yeah, after a little bit more than a decade as an IC designer, I felt that keeping up with the technology, keeping up with all different things ICs was not as interesting to me as much as kind of setting up others on my team to be the best possible designer that I could be. And I found myself slowly moving in the back seat and helping others to a point where I didn't enjoy doing the IC work anymore. Designing, opening at the time was Sketch, and then we moved to Figma. But opening the design software anymore, that didn't interest me anymore. What interested me was seeing others be set up for success, and that's what really brought a lot of joy in my day-to-day. And that's when I was like, hey, that's right. I could potentially move into this other position back here where I could do that every day. And eventually I did it and I stuck with it. And that's the story so far.
Love it. Were there some, do you have some specific examples or what were some of those signals early on? I think also often you're kind of given an opportunity to maybe manage or mentor someone to test it out. What did that all look like for you that gave you that confidence that you knew this is where I want to take my career?
Yeah, I think you kind of already alluded to that. And mentoring was actually my gateway drug to design management in the sense that the fulfillment that I felt as I was providing the feedback and the support and setting up others on my team, that's what kind of interested me into making the move. For instance, when I was working at Zappos, part of Amazon, we had a visual designer that wanted to move into the UX team, and there was really no formal program for that. So I connected with a person, and I eventually created this MVP of a program to get him to the design team. And throughout that year, where he basically prepped to become a UX designer, kind of followed him, I mentored him, and that was at the end of that year when he finally made it into the UX team. When I was looking back at that past year, I felt that the happiest I had been was when I was helping him more than the actual design work. And so it's that, and that kind of that was the first domino to fall for me, and then it kept going, and I started wanting to mentoring more folks, and then I actually joined Springboard. And I started mentoring in my free time as well, because I enjoyed that so much. And I had great mentees, and it all of a sudden I became not all of a sudden, but it's like this realization. I want to do this professionally.
And you were already doing it.
Yeah.
You were you already were, practicing those skills, even in your free time. You were spending time doing this sort of thing. So that is a very good signal that you're headed in the right direction.
Yeah, mentoring and managing. I think that mentoring is part of managing, but there is so much more that goes into managing. But
can you talk about that? Yeah, what's the difference? Because I think that's an important distinction.
Yeah. So mentoring, the way I look at management, mentoring is part of that in the sense that I want to make sure that I support my team members. I provide feedback. I provide everything that they need to be successful. And so that's one part of it. But there is also all that, the more red tapey kind of things, such as HR or people ops, depending on how you call your human resources department. There is something about growth that you don't necessarily have as a mentor, in the sense that when you look at your design team, you have to understand where your designers want to go, where they want their career to go towards, and you should help them get there. And so that's not something that you do as a mentor, in the sense the mentor, you prep them in the short to medium term, but as a manager, you have to look at more long term, but also don't lose sight of the short and medium. So it's a more involved process, right?
And it's often you're managing a team of, well, it depends, but it often can be at least more than one person. So it's like the dynamics too of that team versus just working solely with that one person kind of in that own. Yeah.
And it's the dynamics between the designers, but also the dynamics between the designers and the product managers, or the designers and engineers, or the designers and the engineers and product managers. So that there's a lot of that. It's a more complex and layered situation that as a mentor you don't have.
Yeah, exactly. like a web of people and process and portfolio.
Yeah, let me give you an example. Like as a mentor at Springboard, that the mentees, they already have a program that they're following. So you support them with feedback. You support them, with that call once a week, or I don't know if the schedule has changed. I haven't been a mentor in Springboard in a hot minute, but there is that connection where you provide the feedback, you go over their assignments. They can ask you questions outside of their assignments too, right? It's a good relationship, but they already have a program. When you become a manager, that program, you also have to create that program for them. It's not just providing the feedback on something that somebody else has put together for your designers. No, you have to put together that something or connect them to the something, say like assignments, some projects, road mapping. It's different.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I wanted to talk mostly today about what it's been like hiring designers, growing a team of designers, especially for people who are starting new in the field, interviewing and getting a job. That could be one of the biggest challenges, really. So I want to just kind of jump into talking about the interview process. So since moving out of the Bay Area about 2 years ago, I'm in San Diego now, as you know. I've made friends with so many more people who work outside of tech. And my husband, actually, he doesn't work in tech either. So it's just kind of like reminded me how daunting the interview process can feel like if you're new to the field that like you're interviewing in. And then a lot of our listeners are trying to transition into design and adapt to this new working culture. So I was wondering if you could help better visualize what they could expect with interviewing for roles in UX design if they're going into it for the first time. And just like a quick overview for now, and then later on we can like dive deeper into each type of interview.
Sure. The biggest difference, going back to what you were saying, that I've experienced between interviewing for a non-tech job versus a tech job, specifically engineering or design, is how many interviews you have to go through with engineering and design and PM. There are quite a few rounds, and that used to be mostly done on site, and now it's done virtually, or it can be a mix of both. I guess now in 2023. But when I was hired at Zendesk, we did everything virtually. So the overall product design process is a level of fit that needs to be understood by the hiring manager, and then there is a sort of like a practical, normally there's a test or a practical exercise that you go through. After that, there's more interviews to assess if you're a good culture fit, if you're a good fit with, say, your engineering partners. So you're going to be talking to both the design team, but also very likely your cross-functional partners, and sometimes even your skip level higher up. So if you're, say, for example, interviewing for a product designer position, you might be talking to the director of product design, even though the product design manager is your hiring manager. So to prep for all of that, you need to understand some of the kind of framing of questions that you're going to be asked, but also practice on that whiteboard exercise or whatever. Mm-hmm. Interesting thing is that if you interview for a rather, a large company, a FANG, for instance, normally they prep you ahead of time. The recruiter will give you a chance to be prepped. So they will tell you, okay, this is the process, how it's going to happen. These are the steps. This is how
they want you to succeed,
exactly.
Right? It's like they want to like give you the information that you can take to best prepare yourself.
Yes, but they do have a very detailed process. If you're interviewing for a startup, it's unlikely they're going to have somebody that's going to prep you, but it could happen. I feel that I think that with a startup, you have to be a little bit more flexible with interviews. Like sometimes you actually talk to the CEO, even if you are interviewing as a product designer, because your boss may report to the CEO at that point, because maybe there are 20 people in the whole company. So you got to be...
That could be your skip level. Yeah.
Exactly.
Or that could be your boss. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Exactly.
Sometimes too. Yes.
Yeah.
So
excellent. Okay. Yeah. So it sounds like what you're saying is when it comes to like an overview of the interview process, you can expect to not only meet with designers, but you'll also be meeting with a number of non-designers as well.
correct. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then you can expect some sort of probably like interactive technical design session, so that you can so the team can like probably better assess your skills. And we'll talk more about that too in depth, but those are just some things to think about.
Yeah. So as a hiring manager, normally I like to do this type of tests just to see how the person thinks. If they are interested in, say, the problem to solve for, or they rush to the solution without skipping skipping out everything else. That kind of tells you their process, how they process information, how they solve problems.
Yeah. Excellent. Okay. Well, before we go and dive deeper into those specific design focused interviews, I'd love if you could share a bit more about just like the process of like, how does an applicant even get in front of a hiring manager? Yeah. I think a lot of this is daunting for people because they just don't understand what's happening in the back end. And so as someone who's like hired a lot of people, could you just help share, provide some color to like what that looks like?
Yeah, I can definitely provide the point of view from the hiring manager standpoint. So when that rec is open, when you have made your case for adding a new person to the team, that rec is open, and when that rec is published, normally people start applying. You see it on LinkedIn, you see on the company's career page. My experience in the last couple of years, I had to sift through 200 resumes every time we open a position, just because
it's a lot.
The UX, product design, it has exploded as an industry. So, and as a hiring manager, sifting through all of that, I can tell you right now, being very realistic, we don't have a lot of time. Even if you have a good recruiter that's kind of skims through your candidates on your behalf based on your criteria, you still may be sent about 50 to 60 candidates that you have to look at their resume, you have to look at their portfolio, and then tell the recruiter, okay, I would like to talk to these 3 people, or, in 50, maybe this 10 or this 15. It's on our end, we do a lot of work to make sure that we look at all the resumes and all the portfolios. We maybe take 5 minutes each candidate, maybe even less sometimes, is just because it's not the only focus of our job. Unfortunately, we do have a lot more. Like, I would love if every time we open a position, my manager will tell me, hey, you know what, Filippo, take the next month to hire this person. Everything else doesn't matter. Yeah, then I will really read all of the case studies. But that's not going to happen anytime soon. So yeah, you have to make snap decisions. So there are important things that you're looking for as you go through the different candidates. And when those boxes, when you check those boxes, then you send that name to that application to the recruiter, and you get that phone call schedule, which normally first you talk to the recruiter, then you talk to the hiring manager.
Mm-hmm. Can you talk a bit more about that then too? Like, how can someone prepare for that call with the recruiter? Because, they're not necessarily they're not necessarily as familiar, right, with a designer would be on terms and language, but they partner with the design team. So how could someone prepare for that kind of interview? I'm
going to be very blunt. The whole purpose of the call with the recruiter is to make sure that the recruiter can assess that you're not crazy.
Nice.
You did not, right? So that you are.
Yeah.
You're not crazy. You are actually a designer, because you'd be surprised how many folks send in, wonky resumes, or they say that they are in. Let's say that you would like to recruit on the West Coast. There could be somebody from Germany sending in a resume that say that they live in Portland, and then when the recruiter talks to them, they're like, "Oh no, I'm in Dusseldorf, Germany."
You're like, wait, what? That doesn't work. That's so funny you brought that up, because I've also interviewed a lot of candidates in my days, and I remember way back, probably 7 or 8 years when I was working at Yelp, we used to get resumes to review from the recruiting team. And the team back then, we were embedded within engineering. So I think there was a little bit of a different dynamic. But we would get some candidates before without portfolios. And it was clear that they were an engineer, but they applied for this design role. And it was like, wait, this is this is not matching up. Like I don't think they realize what they're applying for, or they're just like shooting their shot and applying for everything. And now it's in front of me to like review.
Exactly. So the recruiter's role is to see if they can spot any of these things out by reading resumes before these resumes are sent to the hiring manager. And then depending on how many recs open this recruiter has, they're going to ask the hiring manager to do some of the legwork too. So it really depends. But anyways, the recruiter goes through these things, and if you are a designer and you have, say, a portfolio and you have a resume, then you're likely going to move to the next round, which is talking to the recruiter. And then on the recruiter call, normally, as you said, they're not design experts. So they're going to ask very basic questions like location, or do you happen to be on the West Coast of the United States? Okay, great. They're going to maybe ask a little bit about your resume. I think it's also a great opportunity for you to get a sense of what does this person know about the design team, like some generic questions. I know that this is not something that you and I discussed ahead of time, but if I could provide one last suggestion when talking to the recruiter.
Yes.
I know it's the first time you talk to somebody at this company, but make sure you talk about the compensation for the role right away. You don't want to find out that it's way lower than you thought 5 interviews down the road where you already spent all this time prepping and all this time talking to these people. Find it out right away if it's going to be a waste of time, if it's going to be good compensation for you. I know that sometimes times are tough and you have to adapt, and that's fine. But understanding what you're getting right away prevents a lot of grief down the road. I speak from experience. So yeah, you don't want to do what I did.
Very interesting. That's a good point. And from my understanding too, you don't have to disclose what you're interested in receiving. You can ask back to the company, hey, what is the range for this role, right?
Never. Like if they ask you, when you ask, or if they just ask you, what are you expecting, or what would you like? Never answer the question with a number, because that's the number that everything is going to start from. Always come back with, well, it really depends on a few things. What exactly, as you said, Alexa, what is the range that you were thinking about for this role? And keep pushing back, keep turning it around. I had a very good friend of mine that told me, I called him once because I was about to jump on an interview. This was years ago, where I wanted to discuss this topic. And I was telling my friend, look, how do I get them to give me a number? Because I don't want to provide a number. And he said, keep pushing back. If you feel like it's becoming awkward, just tell them that you want $1 million a year. They're going to laugh. You're going to laugh. But now they have to come back with something. Yes, they have to come back with something, because now the ball is in their court. And so sure enough, that's exactly what happened. We pushed back. I kept telling him, but what is the range? Oh, well, it really depends. But what is the range exactly? And said, but what would you like, Filippo? Like, what is your range? I'm like, well, let's start from $1 million and upwards. Okay, well, the range that we were thinking is not necessarily $1 million, but this is what we were thinking. So I know it's silly, it's a little thing, but I think it really changed the way I started looking at interviews. It's really a negotiation, and you have to be prepared for a negotiation. You can't just go in and say, I'm going to wing it. I'm uncomfortable not doing this, or like not providing my number, so I'll just do it, and then we start from there. You may be leaving thousands and thousands of dollars and opportunities on the table by doing that. So yeah,
like you said, it is a negotiation. It is uncomfortable. It is something to practice. So I think the best advice I would give there is kind of just like try saying it out loud, not saying the number, but like practicing asking the company back. It would kind of depend. It would depend on XYZ. What is the range that you're thinking about for hiring this role? And just say it out loud a couple times. It will get more comfortable. And then, hey, if when it comes down to it, you still end up sharing what you're comfortable with, it's okay. It's a part of the learning process, and it does get easier with more time, practice, and experience. So it kind of is what it is. Yeah. Okay. Well, let's move on from the screen. I wanted to talk a bit about that sort of initial portfolio review, which you did talk about as well. So that portfolio review usually happens by the hiring manager or someone on the team. And that's what's going to kind of, after that portfolio review, that's what will get you into the interview process, where you'll meet with even more people at the company. So what are some ways that people could think about standing out when it comes to that portfolio review? What are some standout portfolios that are memorable for you from your hiring manager days? You applied, you got through the screen from the recruiter. Recruiter sends it to the hiring manager or someone on the team to review that moment in time. How do you stand out?
Yeah. So this is really simple. in the sense that it doesn't, it sounds simple. I mean, I know that it takes time because I did it myself, but a portfolio that stands out, that I will tell the recruiter, okay, this person is what we're looking for. It's really going to depend on a few things. The first thing that I'm going to look at is this person, are the case studies or is the portfolio kind of matching what we're looking for? Like, we may be looking for a product designer that has more visual design skills, or like has overdeveloped or like more developed visual design skills. We could be looking at a product designer that has a lot of analytical skills and a lot of so it's really important that you find a way to, in a way, target or send the case studies or send the portfolio almost tailored to what they are asking. I know that it's not easy because some folks will download, say, a WordPress theme or open a website on Wix, and that's kind of the portfolio that you have, and you kind of have to send that out. But making it really easy for a hiring manager to find what they're looking for inside of your portfolio, it's going to be key. So having a big hero with maybe a photo that you took or your photo, and where I need to either scroll around or start navigating around to find the case studies, so that adds time to my
yes,
that time that I could be looking at your stuff. Instead, I'm navigating around. So making it really easy for me to find those things, the case studies, is really important. And then having case studies that speak to somebody that reads to them it's important as well. Folks sometimes will have a case study with problem discovery, problem definition, or like solution discovery, solution definition. These are the main titles of as I go through the case study, these are the main titles. They are very generic, and then what I'm going to use to orient myself on that page, in that case study, are going to be the photos or like the images. And they're not always the best way to do it. But again, I have 2 minutes per sometimes candidate. So I have to find hooks that guide me around. And I think that now that I just said that, that's probably the most important thing. Look at your portfolio, thinking, or like frame it as, this person has 2 minutes to look at my portfolio. What are the most important things that I want to communicate to this person? And you make it really easy to find these things. That's it.
Yeah.
Then we can talk details. Yes, like catchy titles, like really silly, fun, or impactful titles. Images, as much as it's not great to say this, but good imagery. It's important because tidy imagery, organized imagery, organized case studies, an organized website. That stuff really matters. So
I think it's important that that there are good visuals, and it doesn't mean that you have to be the most expert or like proficient at UI design. But often in product design, you have to have some good skills there. But I think visuals are important because design is a visual medium, and that's how we help communicate and tell stories to the other people that we're working with. So again, it doesn't have to be like, especially when you're first starting out, because you're still learning, but like, it doesn't have to be the most perfectly crafted UI design per se, but putting together a really clear and understandable visual diagram or call out or whatever it is as it relates to your project is going to make a big difference. Because again, that's kind of the part of the job. It's how we tell stories. It's
great. Yeah, exactly. And it's, as a hiring manager, when I go through these things and I see that folks have just leveraged the template and added their content with no thought behind it, it doesn't incentivize me to want to talk to you more about it. It's easy. We can tell normally if you have put your thought into these things, because we've been in the industry for a while. We've done it ourselves. So if you have put thought in your portfolio, how to navigate it, how to, when you describe your case studies, when you describe yourself, if you have put some thought into it, there's some personality that comes through, because we are not hiring a website, we are hiring a person. So if the personality comes through, everything is organized, and you have invested into this thing, then of course I want to talk to you. Now you piqued my interest. I'm like, oh, this person is definitely, they know what they're doing. They are putting thought into what they're doing. They have good communication skills. They're good storytellers. Let's talk to them.
Yeah, it's like a no-brainer at that point. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. I think the last thing I'll say on this before we move on to another one of the types of interviews that people could prepare themselves for is I think the idea is that I think the more you can personalize your portfolio to the type of company you want to work for, or make sure that your portfolio is filled with projects that are relevant, that's also going to make a big difference. Just for example, at Zendesk, we build customer service software. We're enterprise B2B company. If your portfolio is filled with marketing websites, which is still UX design work, or it's e-commerce, actually e-commerce might be a little bit relevant, but if it's filled with more marketing websites, and then maybe you have a graphic design project in there or a print project, that can be kind of confusing. And maybe that's a part of your story and your background. You have all this other kind of design work that's relevant to your story. But if I land on your portfolio and there's projects in there that I can't see translate into the work that we're doing at Zendesk, for example, it's going to be harder for me to connect okay, yeah, this is the need of our team. This is what we wrote in the job description. It's the kind of what we're looking for, skills wise, and what gap is on our team. And then I look at the portfolio and it's mismatched there. That's also going to be a bit confusing as a hiring manager. Maybe you do have that relevant work. It's just further down the page, or it's not clear to me which project to click into, and I click into that one that's the marketing website. That's your shot. So just being really clear about what you want, I think, too, going into applying. And then this is the last thing I'll say on this small tangent, but if you really want to shoot your shot at maybe this is one of your dream companies or your top 10, because you're going to apply to a lot of companies if you're first starting out. But, if you really want to shoot your shot and really put your best foot forward with one of these companies that you're excited about, you could even send them a unique URL that's just for them, mywebsite.com/hello Zendesk as an example. And that page on your website could be curated just for them. And that would certainly make you stand out, I think.
Yeah. If you find that, as you said, I will do that if there are this, 5 or 6 companies that are really aiming for creating those and keep them in your back pocket for when they have an opening. That's great. But yeah, overall, Alexa's right on the money.
Yeah, not super practical if you're applying to 50 or hundreds of companies at one time, which is often the case for a lot of people. But yeah, that's just the truth of it. Okay, so once you've made it past the portfolio review, you'll start to have one-on-one meeting interviews with different people on the team, probably first the hiring manager. But in those interviews that you'll have with maybe the product design hiring manager, might be other designers, it could be product managers or engineers, maybe it is someone else at the company, depending on the role. There are going to be behavioral questions that are going to come up during those interviews. So I was wondering, for one, could you help us define what even is a behavioral question? And then I'd love to hear how you could start preparing to answer some of those questions.
Yes, that's a really good point. So behavioral questions are used to assess a candidate's familiarity or skill set or skill level with something by having the candidate describe a particular scenario that happened in the past. Many companies are now doing that for 2 reasons. Number one, it's really good. A good prediction for future behavior is past behavior, right? So that's a good indication of, hey, this person has this skill set, or this person solved this problem this way. So because you have to describe a scenario where that thing happened. Number two, it's also a kind of a way to not be liable for any odd questions that you could ask, hey, how old are you? Or these are a little bit more extreme questions, but biased questions. So the behavioral questions are unbiased, should be unbiased questions that basically are going to allow the interviewee to describe a situation and how they...
Examples.
Yes, exactly. So they're really useful. They're really useful, and...
It's almost like the portfolio, because I think that's what makes the design industry... I think that's, of all the things that are challenging, I think about tech and design, we have our fair share of, I think, challenges in the industry. I think the portfolio review is a great tool because it is one of the most objective ways we can evaluate a candidate. So similarly, when it comes to behavioral questions, that allows the interviewer and the candidate to have a more objective conversation about their experience.
An example of a behavioral question could be, Alexa, can you tell me of a time where you used quantitative data to make a design decision and push through engineering, or something like that, right? Where now Alexa has to think, okay, let me see. Oh, it's about 6 months ago I did this, so I can probably bring that up. Okay. And then you start answering the question and you describe exactly what happened, how you leverage quantitative data. It's really useful for me as a hiring manager because I'm like, oh, that's great. So this happened. This is how she reacted, or this is what she proposed at the time. And yeah, so it's a great tool for hiring managers, but I know that it's kind of daunting when you are on the other side of the table, because now you're like, oh my goodness.
What was that time? I know I've had a time where I've done that, but like, I just can't remember. Yeah, exactly.
And that's fine. As long as it's something that comes close. You can also be very upfront. Hey, look, something let's go back to this example. Oh, well, I haven't had a chance to work with quantitative data as much, but I can give you an example when I used user data or like qualitative data when we use say usertesting.com when I use usertesting.com to make my case to my PM or to push the project through or something like that. So that's fine. I have yet to meet a hiring manager that says no. I said quantitative. I want that quantitative anecdote. No. It doesn't work that way. And I also appreciate you not like redirecting and reframing. That's great. So there's no problem with, or even if you have never used quantitative and qualitative data, I mean, there's some argument there about designing without any of these things. But if that didn't happen, there's always a way to redirect to where like,
yes. Or maybe it didn't happen in a real life use case because maybe this is your first job and you only have personal or student work, right? So you can like speak to
the student work,
speak to an example still kind of in a more, this is how I would potentially, work with these were the success metrics I would consider if we were, building this thing for real. This was what we were aiming for. And then you probably are able to do some qualitative, or I don't know. What are you thinking?
Yes and no, because behavioral questions are specifically designed for you to bring up an example from the past. So I would use it, it kind of invalidates the behavioral question there. But what I would do is just, if you don't have, like, say, quantitative or qualitative examples in your student work, like say you're finishing up your curriculum at Springboard and you are doing one of these interviews, you have done all of these things, but also you have done, say, competitive analysis. So maybe that's something that it's a table stake project where instead of using qualitative or quantitative data coming from, say, the analytics team or user research, you can leverage other type of research that you have done, right? There is always a way to turn it around as long as you breathe, relax, because most of these things have already happened to you or close enough to where you can redirect the answer being very upfront. And that's okay. As interviewers, we are not there to trick you. We're not there to wait until you don't have the answer because gonna have the evil smile and be like, oh, you don't know this, huh? No.
Yes.
We want to set you up for success. So
yeah, they want the hiring manager and anyone who's interviewing you, they want you to succeed.
Yeah.
That's always the case.
Exactly. There's no tricking. So, and if you feel like as a candidate, if I felt that happened to me as a candidate, I will probably just stop the interview and just get out of there, because I don't want to work with folks that are trying to trick me into a job or interviewing me with that attitude. So I will leave that interview, I myself. Going back to your question. So whenever I'm asked, or my recommendation, whenever you're asked in a behavioral question, yes, something similar has already happened to you. So you just have to take a moment, and you can actually ask, hey, can I take a few seconds to think about it? Just give me a second to collect my thoughts. I normally, as a hiring manager, love when they do this, when the interviewee do that, because instead of just having, the awkward silence, they're actually telling me what they're doing. And I know it sounds silly, but it makes me feel like, oh, they are good at communicating their needs. They're good at communicating what they need from me. So take a moment, think about that particular time, and then what I normally recommend, and that's something that I use myself, it will be the STAR method.
Mm-hmm.
Situation.
Yeah. What does STAR stand for? Yeah.
Situation, task, action, and then results. So it's essentially explaining the situation or the context around it. What was the task that needed to be accomplished? And then the actions you took to accomplish the task, and finally the results. So it's a small little essay right there. Like it's it can take 30 seconds to 30 minutes to use the STAR method, depending on, it's a flexible enough framework where it can take as much time as you need.
I almost would write that down on a sticky note, while I'm interviewing, and once I'm asked a behavioral question, be like, okay, situation, check. And then next part of the story, okay,
Task.
Task, check. Yeah, so that's probably what I do.
We can't really see what's around your screen. So if you have Post-it notes, that's also super fine. Notes, Post-it notes, whatever you need to get into that frame of mind, to the headspace for interviewing, because it's stressful, and we all know that. We all know that you're going to be nervous. Sometimes we are nervous on our end. So I think we understand that. But let me give you an example of a STAR method answer. So it could be, actually, let's do some role playing, Alexa. Do you have a behavioral question for me?
I was going to say, I have a few examples that I wrote down. So I was wondering if you could go through them.
Sure.
We'll do 2 or 3 of these.
2 or 3? Just
to give.
All right.
Yeah. Or maybe 1. I guess we'll see. Maybe, is it a 30-second answer, or is it going to be a longer one?
That's right.
Just because I want to give people also like a little bit of an understanding of like what in context this means in a design interview, because they could show up in engineering interviews or product manager interviews too, but they look a little bit differently. So this first one, how about this? Tell me about a UX project that didn't go as planned. How did you manage it?
As a manager or as a designer?
Oh, let's see.
I can do this as a designer.
I was going to say, just because I know a lot of people listening are trying to like transition into or get their first design job. So as a designer. Okay,
give me a second, because I haven't been a designer in a second. I can give you an example. Okay, so a few years ago, I worked as a freelancer for this real estate app in LA, and we had a product that was supposed to help facilitating the buying and selling of real estate, and they wanted to test the MVP in the LA area. So my task was to get in there, making sure that I will design the app based on the website and facilitate the buying and selling side of things. It took quite a long time to put the app together and making sure that the buying side and the selling side were talking to each other. But after a while, I was able to put it together, and I did that by extensive rounds of user testing, and it was quite a long project. Unfortunately, once we launched, it didn't go as planned. It didn't really get adopted. The reason why it didn't get adopted is that we did test with users, but we didn't test with target users. So once we put it in the hands of the folks that actually needed to use it, they found it super awkward as an interaction. So usability, when we tested it, worked, but the actual users wouldn't really use it. So I did have a plan to iterate on it. Unfortunately, the startup went belly up. It just didn't work out. But I did have a plan to make that interaction far less awkward for the two to talk to each other. So that's an example.
Excellent. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a great example. Absolutely. And I do like that you took that moment to think about it. Because even I was like, I got to think about it myself. Oh, I think I do have an example. That's great. I have 2 more, but I think just so we can keep the conversation moving, I might just give the examples, because I'd love for people to just get a frame of reference around like what an example of this question could be. And then I'd love to talk a little bit about sort of like the interactive sessions. What do you think? Or do you want to do one more?
I can do one more, but the other thing that I wanted to bring up is that it doesn't always have to be an example where you were the rock star and you kicked ass and took names and you are the best. No, it could be also an example like I just brought up where it didn't work out, but it's more about how you approached it. And I gave a super short action there, but it's just an example of like how I would approach it. Let's go through another one just quickly.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I'm glad you brought that up. Okay, here's one more. Share an example of what your process is like when collaborating with other team members, such as product managers.
So I can share my process, but I can share my process by sharing an example. Does that work?
Yes, that would be great. Okay,
just give me 1 second. Yeah, so when I was working at Zappos, I was working with this great product manager. Danielle, if you're listening, you're a great product manager.
Shout out Danielle. Yeah.
And when she was new on the team, we were tasked to build a customer service solution for Zappos at the point. So it was the first time working with her, and the way we approached it was extremely collaboration. There was a lot of collaboration. So the context, she's new, I'm relatively new. We have to build this huge tool. The job to be done was to build this tool for the customer service team at Zappos, because the customer service software that we were using was not really helping our agents. So the way we did it was we met almost on a daily basis, and we did a lot of brainstorming and whiteboarding sessions together. We will meet to understand, okay, we talked to 3 agents today. What were the takeaways for you? What were the takeaways for me? We talked to 3 fraud specialists, and these are the takeaways. We looked at together, at the scope that we needed to, the scope of the entire piece of software. And then we looked at the different features that we wanted to launch for an MVP together. I can't tell you exactly who did what, because it was such a tight collaboration that we were like a hydra, almost like a person with 2 heads at that point. And it was such a beautiful project that they still have the same this software that we built together. They're still using it today at Zappos, and not only their things like average call time went down, customer satisfaction went up, but it's a piece of software that is tailored to the agents, because by working together and having values such as, we want to build it tailored for our agents, we want to make it easier for our customers to contact us. It's something that they're still using today.
Amazing. I think I really liked how specific you got to with that answer. I think as someone who would be playing the role as a hiring manager, I'm like, okay, I want to ask more about the whiteboarding sessions. I want to ask more about those one-on-one meetings where you were jamming on the work together. And that provides me the ability to kind of learn and understand more in that. So yeah, that's really excellent. Thank you. I do have one more, but I think I want to ask it in a bit of a different way, because I guess, again, a lot of listeners to this podcast are going to be starting their career fresh. They're going to be potentially looking for their first job. What if they get a question where, and we talked maybe about this a little bit at the beginning, but where they don't feel like they can really answer it. So this one, tell me of a time you had to push back hard to get your design approved. So if someone just was has their experience at their boot camp, they haven't necessarily had to push back. Maybe they have, but again, maybe in this example, they haven't had that. How would you reframe that question, do you think? Or how would you answer it?
Yes. So I will probably scan my brain, because by the time you're done with by the time you're done with the question, I already know if I have it or not. Well, I already know if it's easy to find or not. Then I can ask for a minute to dig a little bit deeper. But sometimes when you dig deeper, you find it. Sometimes you don't. Sometimes when you're done with the interview, you're like, oh no, that's right, I did that thing. Why didn't I bring it up? So you can't just stay there for 5 minutes. So normally, if I don't have it right away, I ask for the minute. I think about it a little bit more. If I can't find it, I'll find it. What's the core of the question, right? Like in this case, the core of the question to me sounded like it was about pushback. It was about conflict, yeah. Right? So being able to move forward or resolve a conflict in my favor. So what I can think about is, did I work during my student projects or during my time at Springboard or at another bootcamp? Was there a time where I had to work?
Stand up for my design.
Yes, stand up for your design, but work with someone like an actual client or... In one of these, say for the capstone, if you had to work with an external agency or an external client, those are the things that I will tend to gravitate towards if I don't have an example of a product manager or somebody at a company. If I don't have that, then what I will think, okay, I also talked to my mentor. Was there ever a time where my mentor provided feedback that I did not agree with? So I made my argument based on blah blah, and then I had some sort of positive resolution.
Interesting. Yeah. I like that a lot too. Yeah, because that's a good point. Especially if you sign up for a boot camp like Springboard, you're going to be working with an external client for one of your projects. So if it doesn't happen there, another scenario could be, in conversation with your mentor. Yeah. Because, you're constantly working with them, getting design critique on your work, and it's totally fair to push back on their feedback.
Exactly. They just go to the nugget of what is the question about? What do they want to know? In this case was conflict. So whatever other scenario you have where you dealt with conflict, boom, that's fine. Yeah. And you can also say, hey, thanks for asking that, Alexa. I don't have an example at a company specifically, but I can give you an example of how I did conflict resolution or how I was able to push my design through with this particular client when I was at bootcamp. Is that okay? It's most likely yes.
Yeah, if you've gotten to that point too, especially. Yeah. Excellent. Okay, we can't move on from the interview, talking about interviews without talking about the sort of like interactive session. Yeah. Sometimes it's a whiteboarding session or a design challenge, or I know at Zendesk before we've done sort of like mock critiques, design critique, to evaluate the candidates' collaboration skills. So anyway, I guess I'm just curious, what is your perspective on these interactive sessions? What is most common these days? How can someone prepare for this sort of interview?
Yeah. So this is a great question, and it's all about understanding how you think, kind of how you process information, and how you, once that's processed, you execute on that. That's it. There's nothing more than that. What's commonly done is a whiteboard session. There are a ton of different prompts that companies have, but I can tell you where I see the most, specifically on a whiteboard session, the biggest mistakes that I normally see are folks jumping right to the solution, folks jumping right into sketching or designing, folks not asking questions, and folks not communicating what they are going to do. Normally it's an hour session, but you kind of want to wrap it up a little bit earlier so you can actually either ask for feedback. I know that some folks are not going to give it to you because they are liable. So they're actually told by their HR, do not provide any feedback. Yeah. But you can always ask them questions about the team. Is this an example of something that we're going to be tackling, or like something similar? Or you can just ask them about whatever questions you have about the job. It's just really important for you to know about. But going back to the whiteboard session, what's really important is to communicate a lot about what you're thinking, what you're about to do, how you're thinking about things. Because if you don't talk, I don't understand what you're doing. I have to make assumptions, or it's inevitable that I'm going to make assumptions. Not necessarily judge you as a designer or judge you as a person, but just make an assumption of how you are doing this thing, how you are solving this problem. So it's even if you're just thinking, so I don't think I have enough qualitative data here. I only have this one pain point. How can I solve it based only on this? Do we have any qualitative data? Do we have any other data that I could use on this thing? And then they're going to be answering you. And if it's no, then you're going to use what you're going to use. But they know that if you work with us on our team, on a daily basis, that's how this person will approach this problem. They will look for this data, and that's great to know because we normally do have this data. But that's just an example. If you don't talk, if you don't say any of that, I'm like, okay, what are they thinking? What are they trying to do? Do I have to nudge them a little bit? I don't know. So that's one. The other thing is obsess about the problem, but then move on once it's framed enough for you, in the sense that you want to learn about what the problem is about. If we have data about it, who's affected by the problem, what pain points are they experiencing? So once you know pretty much what the foundation of this thing is, then you can literally say, okay, I think I know enough. I can start thinking about a solution. That's fine. And if the person on the other end doesn't think you know enough, they probably are going to start asking you questions like, okay, how confident are you that this is the target audience? And you're like, oh shoot, I didn't ask about the target audience. That's right. And you can yep. say that. But going through it very kind of methodically, and none of this works unless you practice a lot. You gotta practice this thing. Call a friend of yours, call your mom, or do it without anyone else. But you have to practice these things. There are plenty of websites online where you can find whiteboard exercise prompts. Practice.
Really?
Yes.
You will have to send me that link. We can try to include that in the show notes.
Yes.
Because prompts are where it's at, because that does allow you to practice, like you just said. Just
practice. Whether it's an app for a cruise, or a website for a gym, or a solution for a robotic restaurant, or drones, emergency drones, whatever it is. It doesn't matter. The subject of it doesn't matter. What matters is that you really
the thought process.
Exactly. You get
that goes into it.
Mm-hmm. You get the process down to a T, because it's all about practicing. If you think about, I'm going to go in there and wing it, good luck. You're going to be nervous because you don't know who. It's just the nervousness about being in an interview. Plus now you have to tackle something that you're not necessarily super familiar with, using a process that you haven't really practiced. So good luck. Unless you have nerves of steel.
I know. It makes me nervous just thinking about it. I'm like, I haven't interviewed in a long time because I've been at Zendesk for almost 6 years. Can you believe that? But yeah, even for myself, it's like I would probably need to freshen up on my like, whiteboarding challenge exercise skills if I was going to be actively hiring or actively interviewing, because even someone who's been in the industry for a while can still get nervous.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah. And all it is allowing you to demonstrate your skills, which is what this is all about, especially with design, because it's so project based. It's just about like I think when you frame it in that way, it doesn't have to feel as scary either. Yeah. It's just, the team wants to know how you collaborate, how you think. And again, they want you to succeed. So going in as prepared as you can is the best you can do.
Yes, being very honest and communicate that. I think it's really where you see good candidates becoming great candidates. It's not always, oh, this person knows more or they have better skills. Sometimes it's just this person communicates more during the exercise, or this person lets us know how they think. Like they have one of the best whiteboard interviews. Actually, with exercises, we didn't even finish it. Like, that's true for most, right? You don't really finish, but you don't have to. But we barely passed the problem definition stage of the exercise. But this person was so curious and asked questions and really wanted to explore the problem. I'm like, yeah, I would love to have this person on the team. Are you kidding me? This person will be great in a day-to-day, because that's all that you're trying to do during an interview, right? Is this person, do I see myself working with this person on a daily basis?
Excellent. And just as we're interviewing candidates, the candidate's also interviewing the company.
Yeah.
Do you have any examples of good questions you think that candidates should be asking the companies?
Yeah. That's a good one. I think asking about culture is really important. Asking about work-to-life balance is really important. And for those folks that you see and were like, oh, they ask for work-to-life balance. No. I mean, unless you are interviewing for a very early stage startup where you're kind of signing up for not having a lot of work-to-life balance. Unfortunately, that's the reality. Maybe that's something you love, so that's fine. You need to have a work-to-life balance. So asking about culture, work-to-life balance, asking about how the different teams collaborate. You want to know if it's a design-led team or a product-led team, an engineering-led team, because it makes a difference.
It does, yeah.
It does make a difference.
Yeah. I was saying earlier, I worked at Yelp, for example. It was one of the companies I worked at before Zendesk, a very engineering-led company. So the dynamic was really different than even at Zendesk and like at a startup I worked at prior to Yelp. And so, yeah, I think that's a really good one to ask. Can you talk a little bit more about the why, though, as it relates to culture and work-life balance? Why should someone be asking about that?
Because you're working there 8 hours a day. So at least, so you want to know the type of culture that the team has, the type of culture that the company has. Is this going to be a fast-paced, high-output team? Are you prepared for something like that? Is this a team that releases once every 6 months? Is this too slow for you? Is this a type of culture where you have, and I'm bringing up Zappos because it's a good use case or a case study for this. Like, is this a company where you have a lot of parties and you're incentivized to spend time together with your colleagues because building the relationships is really important for the company? Mm-hmm. Ask about company values. Ask about company vision and mission. It's something that you should have looked up ahead of time, but asking what it means for them. Ask them, what do you think their number one, the value that let's say the company has 10 values. Great. You can ask the hiring manager, what's the one core value that you think is applied the most, and why? Like, how is that applied on the team that I'm about to join? Because I'll say this, the project or the work overall can get boring, but if you're working on a team of folks that you like working with in an environment you like working with overall, you can be happy and still be content and keep staying on the team. The other way around doesn't work. You can have the most interesting product and super, using a French word, crappy culture, and you're going to be running out of that environment. So does that answer your question?
I think so. Yeah, I definitely resonate with that. I think, and I think especially why I've just loved and enjoyed working in tech throughout my career is because the culture and the work-life balance is something that is really important to the industry. And I think there's like a higher standard of it, compared to other industries. And it's also okay if you don't resonate with one culture or like the company values of one company and you do with another. Like, it's just kind of trying to figure out so that you don't find yourself 6 months later being like, crap, like this was not the right fit for me, and making sure that you figure that out and, do that during that time when you can figure it out as best to your ability.
And just bringing up another example, like the culture that we have, the culture of the different companies have, it could be very different from what you want. Like you could want a more formal, more professional type of culture, and a company maybe only be able to offer something informal, less organized. But they're not going to tell you that. But like it's going to be more informal, more having happy hours together, scrappy. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But if you want a very professional, more corporate environment, it doesn't matter what these folks are working on. That's not going to be good for you. It's not going to make you happy in the long term. And the opposite is also true. If you're more laid back and relaxed and you want to work with folks that a certain relaxed type of culture and relaxed relationships, like where you can kind of informal, as I said before, then look for someone that has that type of culture, or ask that to your hiring managers, when you go through the interviews, ask that to these folks about the type of culture. You want to know that before you jump in, and
I think I'm really glad you brought this up, because to your point, you're going to spend a lot of your life, a lot of your time between Monday through Friday, like working at this company with these people. And so why not set a high standard for yourself too, and find a place that works well for you and what you need.
You just made me think about something else. I think if you are desperate to find a position, that's going to suck. But if you do have some time, this is true for everyone though. Okay, let's start with that. Overall, my recommendation will be, before you even apply for jobs or while you're applying, make a list of what you want. It's really easy to apply just to get a job, and just so until you find the thing that you actually like. And you keep doing that, and you are 20 years down the road not having found the thing that you really like, because you kept applying to a job that was supposed to be temporary and lasted for 10 years, but then you didn't like it, so you applied for another temporary job that lasted another 5 years. And the job at Google or Meta or this other little startup that you really wanted, it never panned out because didn't make it clear with yourself about what exactly you wanted out of your next position and how that laddered up to your vision for your whole career. It takes an hour, no more than that if you're in a rush. Take an hour out of your weekend or your day. Think about these things. It's super important.
And write it down, to your point. Yeah. I think that's the key. Write it down, because it's one thing to have thoughts in your head and it makes total sense up there. And then it's another to take that and put pen to paper and be able to visualize it. Because again, we're designers. So a lot of what we do is help tell stories visually. I think that's really great. And then you can revisit it and come back to it. And also you won't lose it in your head, because I don't know about you, but that happens to me all the time. Okay, but to kind of wrap all this up, we were kind of talking about it because it's you can aspire to that list. But there's also no secret right now to anyone. There's been a lot of layoffs in tech. Yeah. Many companies have slowed down hiring. So for someone who's trying to land their first UX design job, how would you work with them to persevere through this challenging job market? And how would you help support them in trying to figure it out?
So a couple of things that come to mind. The first one is everything that we have said about having a good portfolio, having a good resume. Now it's more important than ever, because unfortunately the market is very competitive. So if you think, well, I'm going to apply to 300 jobs with a subpar or with an okay resume and an okay website, guess what? There is another 1,000 of people that are doing even more than are doing the same thing. And if they have spent even just 2 hours more than you on their stuff, they're going to get selected ahead of you. So it's now more important than ever to take care of these things and even do something, go the extra mile and do something unexpected. I don't know what that looks like, but whatever you can do to stand out, to have your personality shine through your resume, portfolio, and whatever else you want to send the hiring manager. So that will be one. That's the investment now has to be double or triple what it used to be, unfortunately. The other thing is it can take a while before you land a job. So what I would do myself in a market like this, if I were a newer I see will be finding any way I can work. Freelancer, any type of avenue where I can learn, flex my skill set that would probably also allow me to have more case studies for my portfolio. So that's also like a getting two birds with one stone.
The more you can practice.
Exactly. You get to practice, number one, so you become better at your job, but you also have things to show on your portfolio. So it's like it's a win-win, right? I will find any possible way to work. If I couldn't find work, even as a freelancer, I will probably just look at apps, products that I use on a daily basis where I see gaps and write my own case studies. Very detailed case study, like treat it as a project. I know that they're not a replacement for work. Unfortunately, that's true. As a hiring manager, when I see passion projects, they're not as good, or like they're not as reliable as actual work, because with actual work, there's a ton more that happens there. But it's better to have those that have nothing or very little. Maybe some things that you've done 2 years ago, or just the examples that you have from your bootcamp. Unfortunately, I mean, it's great if you can supplement the things that you've done in bootcamp with other projects or other things you have done, because guess what? So many folks are graduating for bootcamps right now, and many portfolios tend to look similar. So take that as an opportunity to differentiate yourself. That's what I would do.
Yeah, got to go that extra mile. And part of that, I think, is also surrounding yourself with people who can help you get there. So if it's in Springboard with like your design mentor or that community, or it's reaching out to folks in the design community, whether it's on like Twitter or LinkedIn or Instagram or YouTube or like whatever it is, right? Like finding people who you can ask questions to and get feedback from, I think is a part of it.
One last thing that I will say is that networking. I know that in the design industry, we have a lot of introverts. I myself am an introvert. I think it's a spectrum. It's not like either you are an introvert or you're an extrovert, and there's a spectrum. I tend to be more on the introvert side of things. But there were a few networking opportunities that I had when I was living in LA. Like, for instance, I went to this Hulu presentation. It was actually a design collective. I think it was actually called the Design Collective, but it was a design community that had this event at the Hulu headquarters in LA. And I went there with a friend of mine, ended up bumping into a friend of a friend that needed a UX designer for a project.
Exactly. That's how it happens.
At the time I was a freelancer, so while I was waiting for something to come about, I worked for this guy for a project. So sometimes going to these things is not the most exciting opportunity, but when you are in person, it makes a difference, because now you are there and you don't need to work 3 hours on a beautifully written email. You're actually there as a person, so you can introduce yourself to people and getting to know people. And I think that's another option.
Yeah, absolutely. Filippo, thank you so much. This was such a great and very interesting conversation. There's so much in here, I think, that people can learn when it comes to interviewing for roles in UX and product design, and better understanding what that interview process is like, not only for themselves, but what it's like on the hiring manager and the company side, which is a big part of it. I think it's a big part of getting it right. So Thank you so much for spending the time with me today to talk about this. Anything else you want to share before we totally wrap things up? Where can people find you online? All that, those sorts of things.
The only thing that I have is my LinkedIn page, so you can find me on LinkedIn. I hope that throughout this session, I was able to give some more generic or like general kind of framework type of things you can learn from, but also some more practical takeaways. So if you have more questions and you want to dive a little bit deeper, you can reach out to me on LinkedIn, and then we can take it from there.
Look at that. You can reach out to Filippo, make those connections. It's about the people you meet along the way. Thank you so much. We'll include links in the show notes. I think that's all going to be all for now.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Bye.
Bye.
Filippo just shared with us a lot of great insights on what to expect when interviewing for a UX design position in tech, especially when it comes to that portfolio review. So if you're ready to make that next big step with your career in design and get started on creating your portfolio, Springboard offers a 9-month UI UX design bootcamp with one-on-one mentorship, real-world design projects, and personalized career coaching. It comes with a job guarantee. Use the code ADAPTIVEBYDESIGN to get $1,000 off enrollment for design bootcamps with Springboard. You can find more information in the description below. Thank you so much for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure to subscribe so you can stay up to date as new episodes drop. Again, my name is Alexa, and you've been listening to Adaptive by Design, living the UX life. I'll see you next time.